That was a quick overview of some of the sounds that I put together for my submission for the Crowhill Composer Challenge, and that challenge is to rescore the trailer for their Venom plugin. The rules of the challenge were to record your own sounds only using a smartphone, using your own DAW only and free FX or third-party FX, no instrument plugins or layering with other samples and things like that. The aim of this video is just mainly for good practice and to share a few ideas, and also because other people have been sharing things on the forum, and I thought a video would be a good idea to share some of mine. Plus it's also good practice as I haven't done a video before. There might be a bit of background noise as the environment I've got isn't exactly suited to it, but hopefully that shouldn't interfere. So the quick overview included the bass, and I thought I'd start with that one because, as you can see, there's a load of channel EQ plugins in the strip. The only reason for that was because I was changing my mind as I went along. Ordinarily I'd probably have gone back to the drawing board and started the EQing again, but I was kind of doing it on the fly, so I thought I'll just leave them in there. There's no special reason for them being there, it's just that was the way I was working. So consequently a lot of the stuff that's in these various EQ plugins will cancel each other out, but it doesn't matter for my purposes. So you've seen how the different effects change the sound of the throat singing sample that I've got here, but I thought I'd go into a couple of more details of how I automated it and why I chose certain effects. This is the beginning of the trailer, and you've got some volume automation. You can see send to a Leslie cabinet, the mix of the pedal board, which is this pedal board, which has got the grit distortion on it, and the coarse frequency of the ring modulator that I've got here, which has an EQ to the side of it too. I've also got the depth of the tremolo and the rate of the tremolo being automated, so I'll just solo that now just to amplify it a little bit. Okay, so that's the sound on its own, and most of the crackling from that comes from the Ring Mod plugin here, but I thought I'd point out a few more details of that because if you know anything about Ring Mods, you know they're very difficult to work with. The way I understand they work is that they take the signal that you put in, they add it to another signal, usually a sine wave, and then it multiplies those signals together and gives you an output which is based on the sum and the difference of those signals mixing together. So as you can see here, the mix of the pedal board is automated as well as the frequency. The frequency doesn't change that much, but that's because, and I'll show you here, each note that you play on the keyboard responds better to a very specific frequency from the ring modulator depending on how you're using it. So right now if I press the note G, it sounds alright, but C, very good. If I move it over to where I've automated it to just 1 point above, 68, the note C sounds a lot better than it did just before, but go back to G again. Not great again. Due to the fact that the result from a ring modulator is very inharmonic, you need to get just the right frequency for each note. So that's not so good if you're trying to do stuff on the fly or you're doing things live, but since I was composing something for a trailer, it didn't really matter. But it does mean that you need to change the ring mod if you add any new notes in. So for example, if I go back to C again here, if I just sharpen that a little bit, it's not too bad, but it's not great either. Go back to here again, note G. So G sounds okay, but if I just sharpen it, not great. If I flatten it, not great again. So if I stick with that F sharp and I move the ring modulator around, so some of those are okay, but only 71 here sounded great. But go back to G again. It needs to be 68, 69 even. So Each note will need a different setting if you want it to sound good. The other thing I do with ring modulators sometimes is I will just have the mix very low, and I only have an effect here that's for the purposes of sending it to a distortion. Say adding a little bit of a low mix of a ring modulator gives a certain crackle that helps with the distortion, but if you overcook it a little bit, obviously it sounds more and more atonal as you go along. So before it goes to the ring modulator, it goes through this grit distortion, and after the ring modulator, it goes to this cabinet here. I've got the gain set right down to the bottom. I did have it a bit higher, up to about here, and that was okay, but it was just a bit too much for the mix of the overall track when I finished it. So after experimenting a lot, and again messing around with all these multiple EQs and adding more of them as I went to get rid of things I didn't want and add things that were missing. And finally, the tremolo. The reason for the tremolo was because without it, it just was a little bit too much, and it would have overpowered everything else. So with a reasonably deep mix on the tremolo, a little bit more if you want, and smooth it if you like. So a lot of it's balancing stuff out. Obviously the throat singing sample has a lot of harmonics in it anyway, especially when you start doing overtones and things with it, so a ring modulator only increases that more. But if you can get the balance right, you can get something really interesting out of it, and hopefully that's what I achieved here. Another quick note with this one is that it's side chained from the kick drum, just to take some of the harshness away and make sure it doesn't interfere too much in the mix, and it's also sent to a stereo delay. I tried widening it within the channel itself, but it was just a bit too much, and so I just sent a very narrow range of frequencies overall, well, narrow-ish range of frequencies to a stereo delay just to add a little bit of width. I'll play it with and without just to give an impression of what difference that makes. And obviously you can hear there's some width coming from the Leslie cabinet as well, but that gives you a general idea. So the next layer of the bass was from blowing into a beer bottle, and if I just play the sample again on its own, you see I'm following tempo there. Doesn't seem to make too much difference, but that's how I chose it. You can also, of course, slow it down. Adds a bit more of that, I think it's tremophony kind of effect you might call it. Speed it up. For this particular instrument, I just wanted to have a sub bass because some frequencies it felt were a little bit missing from the mix whilst I was working for the original bass from the throat singing that we just went through. So I amped it first, put the shelf on there. So with the G note, it's not really adding sub, it's just adding 100 Hertz, but go down to G and there's this, I don't know if you'd call that subby, but it's almost there. When I A/B tested it, I preferred it with, so I kept it. So this next sound is a small layer that you can't really hear so well. It was being sent to various effects, but actually I decided just to use EQ and compression alone because the sound itself is quite buzzy by itself. And it's an electric toothbrush, hard pound left and right with very slightly different settings on each, just to give us a good stereo effect. This was just from experimenting and trying to add a little bit more crunch to the left and right whilst I was still working on the bass and wasn't quite happy with it. And it's sent to a bus here with just compression and EQ on it, and this is what it sounds like on its own. This one I thought is a good example of the fact that you don't necessarily have to put FX on your samples at all. This bit you might recognise from the beginning of the trailer. And with a duplicated one here which is sent to a reverb but nothing else. So again, all of these are from the glass, the beer bottle being blown, and there's no effect apart from send to 2 different reverbs and a little bit of panning, and that alone can be enough, so you don't need to necessarily saturate everything with effects like I did with that first bass line. The glass bottle is quite pure in comparison. Open this one up again and take the tempo change I made off. Go up here. This instance of the beer bottle sample has been edited in a slightly different way. Just keeping the speed at 1 and following tempo. And that was all that was necessary. Apart from that, I just did gain and compression. I did add reverb to it, of course. And again, that was all that was needed. So here's that main melody, which was kind of an accidental mnemonic, I suppose you might say. The original sample, as you probably heard, was just a throat singing one. I reversed it. Take the reverb off. So there's where it's based on. I reversed it and doubled the speed that it goes through the sample and added some effects. Funny how you go up and down the keyboard, it completely changes things sometimes. Not just in the tone, but... So this is 2 or 3 octaves down from the melody I was playing. And it's really bringing out the Blue Cat chorus and the delay and the reverb here as well. So once you've made a sample instrument and used it for one thing, it's always worth checking what else you could use it for. But in this case, as you can see, I've got some automation on here as well. The stereo delay doesn't come in until the very end, just for those last couple of notes. And just to add a bit of variety, I used the Evoc filter here, just to change the sound. I'll solo that to show you the difference. And those were just creative choices whilst I was composing it. It just felt like it was a little bit samey, even though it's a very short trailer. It just felt like it needed a little bit of difference here and there. This one here is just a high version of the above, and you can see I've done the same thing again with this layer. Different effects being used. This one has just a comb filter because I wanted something that wasn't an exact duplicate. I'll solo that one. So the 3 together, you can see that they complement each other quite nicely. So moving away from the rest of that, there's obviously a few other things that I've used there, which I could go into, but they're all based on similar samples, just with different changes made. So with the kit, I use things like banging a fist on a wooden door, which gave me 3 different kick sounds. Well, it gave me several different kick sounds, and I isolated it down to 3 chosen ones and put different effects on each one. So the first kick, compressor and an overdrive. The second kick is has a bit more high end. I used it a bit more for the punch. And there's a sub kick which is occasionally used. That one sounds like that without, but I wanted to use it as a sub layer only. And you can combine these. And as you can see from the MIDI here, having 2 or 3 different kick sounds or snare sounds allows you to add some variety and what might be perceived as some humanization and that kind of thing. So if I just show you the MIDI here, these are the kicks. So that's the kicks. Just quickly going to the hi-hat. That's the bottle dropping onto the little black plate of a gas hob. So here I wanted to have a little bit of extra tone to it. Sounds alright like that with a full mix. But on balance I chose it roughly about 20% mix, just so a little bit of high and low. It just felt like it bit through the mix a little bit more when I had everything going on. The snare drum. This is a toilet seat being dropped. Very straightforward, just some very reasonably heavy distortion. EQ. Now the snare is also layered with this other kit down here. This also has another little snare layer. This was actually a kettle switching on and off. All it needed was an amplifier. I just wanted something with a certain kind of frequency range, just to add a little bit of a layer to all the different snare drums that I had. Again, something not super perceivable, but overall it makes a difference. Just a little note on the kit. I grouped all these to different groups separately, and the reason is when you use Logic Sampler in multi-output mode, if we go to the actual mix desk here, a bit like with Redrum on Logic, you just press plus and it will have all of your different assigned groups, and you can assign effects to each of the instruments you've got. So if I just go through this kit bit by bit, we've already gone through the kicks and the snare. That's another toilet seat dropping sample. I think I had that as kind of a rim shot, which I used occasionally. That is a 2-litre bottle of water, which is being hit with either an open hand or a fist. It's full of water, and on its own, with a compressor and an amplifier. I had quite a clean amplifier there. And I wanted to add, if I'm not mistaken, yep, it's a, I forget what you call that, and then the tie-dye delay effect. Got a different mix on there. And then quite aggressive EQ. And a limiter, because where you've got the slight randomness of the pedal board plugins here, it did mean that the volume was a little bit too volatile, so I used a limiter to make sure that it didn't do anything I didn't want it to and overcrowd everything else. So it's not something I often use, but sometimes it's necessary, and it's a really good tool to just keep things in place. This sound here was also the bottle lid dropping onto a hod plate. I called it a cowbell-ish because of the tone that it had. And I was sending it to the left, but I wanted it to come through the right as well, but I didn't want to use something like chorus or stereo width plugins, that kind of thing. A lot of the time I will just separate the channel, send the same signal to another channel on the other side, and just make small changes to it. In this case, the left-hand side just has a bit of pitch shift and compression. The right-hand side is just enveloped differently, with a lot of the attack taken off, just to make sure it's perceivable more coming from the left. If I put the gain of the attack on the envelope back up again, oops, you can hear that attack coming through on the right. I didn't want that. I wanted it clearly coming from the left, but also being perceivable as something that's around the mix. On the left on its own, it's just a bit empty. So that's another little thing you can occasionally use. The tom drums, these are also the 2-litre bottle of water being hit in different ways. Sent to different groups because I was going to FX them differently. Changed my mind about that and just sent them to a bus that's only for the toms. So I moved one to the left, one to the middle, one to the right, like probably would. Sent them to their own bass cabinet emulator this time, and I chose a speaker that I wanted. Most of the choices I make for cabinets are really just based on experimenting and seeing what I think will sound good in a mix. It's not necessarily based on it's not really based on anything than aesthetic decisions. It's not really a technical decision as such. It's just I like the sound of that. And if it doesn't work in the mix when you play it all through, then well, there's all manner of different ones you can choose. Just being flexible, really. So this is an interesting sample. This is one that ended up not being used, a deodorant spray can, and the idea was I'd have a kind of a hissing sound that would go left and right on the pan to kind of give the kick an interesting sound and make it sound like it was moving around. It was a good idea, and I did it before in a song years and years and years ago, but in this case it just didn't work too well, and there was so much going on in the mix that adding more high-end hiss like this just didn't work so well, and it ended up crowding other stuff, so I just got rid of it. But it does mean that you can keep stuff like this for later. I will just solo it on its own with the master bus I have going to the percussion, just to show you what it sounds like with and without. So it does sound better with it, I feel, but just not in this mix. And sometimes you have to make decisions like that when you've got a lot of other stuff going on. Sometimes it works, sometimes it just doesn't. So we'll start with it muted and then bring it in, see if you feel that it is crowding other stuff out. So it's not too bad, but discernibly I think it was just a bit too much and was just adding too much interference. It was at a point that I was trying to clean up the mix a little bit towards the end, where I just decided to get rid of that. But again, you can just keep ideas like that for future projects once you've made them, so I probably will end up using that. A little note as well on the sum that I've got all of the percussion sounds going to. Notice there's a couple of pedal boards here. And there's the Rourke distortion unit, which adds literally some crunch to it, another ring modulator. You can tell that's one of my favourite things to use. And I don't bring those in really until later towards the end of the track, so I'll just play that for you just so that you can perceive how that's actually happening. So that was just to add some variety at the end and allow the kind of crescendo that works towards the end to come through a little bit better. So just some general notes on the project overall. There's some sidechain compression going on, mostly from the kick to the bass. Don't think there was anything else I was sidechaining apart from these little stabs at the beginning were sidechained against some other elements just so that they could come through more. Originally, the mix where you've got, if I just open up the movie here, once it behaves itself, when you have the different settings of the plugin being displayed, I had a different kind of semi-stab sound for each of these different settings on the Venom plugin, and originally they were coming through on the mix really, really loud, but I decided once I put the melody in there that really that needed to take precedence. So a difficult decision to make. So the way I mixed it was so they'd be perceivable at least, but that the melody would be in the front. Having the melody and the bass line coming in and those little stab effects here, which I'll solo in a moment, that was just too much for the listener, I felt. So sometimes I think you have to make a few sacrifices like that. I could have just got rid of them completely, and I suppose if this was a project for someone that you were commissioned for, you might get the draft back saying, no, get rid of that, it's too much, or no, I love that, get rid of that silly melody. It just depends, I suppose. So all changeable, but that was the decision I made in the end. So I'll just solo those bits now, which is these channels here, which will give you an idea of what I started with, just so you can see what it would have sounded like if I'd prioritized them. So they're perceivable when you listen back, but again, I wanted the bass and the melody to take precedence there. I can't think of anything else offhand, but that was just an overview of some of the things I did, and of course it was a great project to do because I hadn't used the sampler before. Another little note was originally I used Reason's redrum to put these samples into, and although I clarified later on the forum that would have been okay with the rules, I thought, no, just for good practice, I really need to learn this sampler and how to use it on multi-mode, for example, with the kit. So I just ended up moving the effects over as an admin kind of practice, and it was worth doing, I think. So one other quick note was this sample here, which is another throat singing one which I changed. It's got an auto filter on it, which, as you can see, the envelope's making kind of a squelching sound there. You've got automation to the reverb and delay and the cutoff and resonance of the filter, but also a bypass on and off for this grip plugin here, which is distortion. A few changes like that, and you can use the same channel to have very different sounds. So this part from the beginning of the song, our solo, and at the end, the different automation, which is part of the crescendo sound. Reverb going up towards the end of it, the delay, just a very basic change. The bypass going off there, and then changes to the filter and the resonance, and this was the effect of that. And also the pan, as you can hear there. So that's not an overview of everything, but it covers all the different samples I recorded. There are a few samples I recorded on the phone which I didn't use, but I'm hoping that might give a few other ideas that might not have been considered before of the kind of things you can do with a simple sample, and hopefully it also shows the stuff you can do with a sample that's not been recorded in ideal conditions, which of course was the point of the brief of the competition. So yeah, a hell of a lot of fun and a great way to start sampling, which I'll definitely be doing more of. So thank you very much, hope you enjoyed it, and if there's anything in particular that you wanted to know further about it, please do either comment below or put something on the Crowhill forum.